First thing I want to say about the governance is this is not just a whim that we've just come up with. The evolutionary process on the transition really of Warwickshire County Cricket Club from a members committee-led organisation to an executive-led organisation supported by committee initially and then the management board started back in 2007-2008. And that was a big step for us, and it was that step which I honestly do believe enabled us to actually complete the redevelopment of this ground. I'm not sure, as a committee-led club, whether we would have been able to cope with all of that and manage that through. The most recent change we did was in 2014, when we added the option with the management board to appoint independent directors, up to 3. And that enabled us to bring on board, the first was Michelle, where we were looking as the world of social media, marketing communication was developing. Michelle had those tremendous skills, which thankfully she was prepared to come along to the club and give us that support of her knowledge. And she's been a great asset to the club and actually to the game over the 4 years since she's been involved. Then we brought on board Naz Khan, who has, for those of you who don't know Naz, he's been chairman of Atop Cricket Club for about the last 25 years. I'm not sure whether he's still chairman or not, but he's still very actively involved there. Which actually, to see how that club has developed, particularly under Naz's leadership, particularly a lot of fundraising activity has been tremendous. And Naz provides us with that great insight into the South Asian community, particularly the Pakistani community, which at the end of the day, those communities are representing now some 27% of Birmingham and the West Midlands. So we do need to understand those communities and how we can interact, not just from a point of view of watching cricket, but also how we encourage more along to play cricket, to actually give Ash and Pop down here some actually extra talent to bring in, which I'm sure is out there. We've had some success on that, but not enough really. So Naz has been great on that. And 18 months ago, we added to the non-executive list Mark McCafferty. Mark is a Brummie, born in Sutton Coldfield, went to Bishop's Vesey, then went away to university, and for the last 10 years has been Chief Executive of Premiership Rugby. So obviously he coming along with us gives us insight into another sport. It's particularly been helpful as we thought through the process with ECB on the media broadcasting rights, the deal that was completed back end of last year, middle of last year. So that's given us a great sort of help and boost in actually the quality of the non-executives we need to support the executive in managing this club and taking this club forward in a strategic way. So the next change is really part of that continuing evolution. You don't need me to highlight for you that in recent months, year, so there have been far too many episodes of bullying, racial discrimination, harassment, whether it's a sexual nature or whatever, happening in sport. And that's something we have to be extremely mindful of. And also alongside of that, we're also facing increased operational risks. Again, I need to remind you that as we were trying to stage test matches and Champions Trophy games this year, and sadly there were bombs going off in other parts of the UK, London and Manchester. And we need some strong experience, both at operational level, which Neil can give us from his vast experience of operating venues. Neil also needs that support to actually help him decide what is the best way to operate facilities with people who've also had experience of that, and not just operating but also in the areas of communication. So it's no surprise therefore then that government started to take a great interest in all of this through the DCMS and Sporting. And they published in October 2016 a new code of conduct for sports governance. And before you say, yes, that was predominantly addressed to national governing bodies. And ECB were not accepted from that. They were in there as part of the mix. Was it independent enough? Was it diverse enough in terms of the board? And there was a strong suggestion, unless ECB changed, then their funding could be withdrawn. And hence, ECB went through their own process of governance change, which has taken them to an independent board, which is in the process of being formed with the AGM, which will finalise that coming up in May this year. When that governance code was published, we and the rest of the committee attempted to make a benchmarking against that code as to actually how good, bad or indifferent we were at Warwickshire. And it did throw up a number of issues which concerned us. There was a lack of clarity in terms of the decision-making process, particularly between the management board on occasions and the present general committee. That gave concerns to the executive in terms of lack of clarity as well. So that was one of the prime issues. But we also had to be cognizant of the fact that we've not done a great deal of succession planning over the last 20 years almost. And I'll come back to that more recently. I'll come back to that a bit later. But we needed to come with a system which I believed opened up the opportunity to you as members to actually put yourselves forward with some confidence that you might stand a chance of getting involved with the club if that's what you want to do. When I first came on board, 2004, and the only reason I got on was because sadly we'd had an untimely death of Graham Williamson around about that time. Mike Smith was retiring under the age rule. If you recall, Tim Munton and Andy Lloyd, for their own personal reasons, left the club and left the committee. So I, Mike Williams, John Claughton came and went, Tony Frinch has come and gone, Paul Warren came in as part of that. That was the only change we've had over the last 20, 25 years. And as I say, when I first started looking at the governance of this club, the average age of the committee was 62. And the average tenure on the committee was 18 years. From a minimum of 9 up to a maximum of 40. And trust me, 20 years on the committee was not an exception. 30 years was by no means uncommon, and there were a number who were seeing 40 years out. Now you could argue there's nothing wrong with that, but actually it doesn't smack much of transparency. And the problem was then when we did get people putting themselves forward, and Kim Jones was the last one in 2009, the chance of getting elected against incumbent members of the committee, reliant upon the members' vote for people they may not know, and if depends how much they want to canvass the vote, the chances of it getting on are pretty slim. I remember David Whittingham, who actually eventually did get on the committee, but he stood for about 5 years to get on the committee. And he said to me on one occasion, he said, Norman, he said, the only thing I measure my success or failure upon is whether I got more votes than I did the previous year. He said, I know I've no chance of getting on, but I keep standing, but I keep losing out to the incumbents. So that gets us, as one of my colleagues says, if you're not careful, a bit male, a bit pale, and a bit stale. And a lot of this work we're doing here is to actually try and nudge that on a little bit, to actually get a bit more openness and transparency and involvement from you, the members, in terms of actually how this club is operating. So that's where we came from, and our objectives are to try and create a single body for the management of the club, and that will be the board. I've got a chart coming up in the next slide which will help explain it more to you, but a single body, the board who will manage the club. We do particularly want to protect the integrity of the members' club. Now, one or two of the counties back in the early 2000s went for the big bang, and they just abolished the general committee, set up their own boards, and they have no members' representation particularly strongly on some of those boards. That's not what we as a club were about, and that's not what your committee wanted. So when we come to the chart, you'll see the members' committee is very much about retaining the integrity of that members' club and the ability of members to actually input in terms of what we're doing. Now, nothing's ever easy on all of this, and we can't be changing tack because two people say they don't agree with us, so we have to put sensible parameters on that. But believe me, and I generally do mean this in the committee meeting, we really are attempting to open up the club a little bit for people to get involved. We can't do anything about it if nobody wants to get involved, but we really are keen that people do actually come forward. Ethnicity, gender, racial, that's obviously, whatever you feel about that, it's very important to us. And we do want to get greater transparency, and we do want to try and avoid this self-perpetuation as we're going forward, just summing up what I've just been saying. Now somebody said to me, well, and actually the committee said this to me when we first started the debate, well, what's he going to do with us? We don't get any government money. Well, when you think about that, let's just start with the ECB to start with. The ECB are getting government money and are under pressure to make sure that where they're using that money and their members are in a fit shape as clubs and being governed well. The new county partnership agreement, which is the agreement we have with the ECB on the distribution of their funds on an annual basis, on this new agreement, which is likely to come in 2019, will incorporate not just the county club, the distribution of funds to the recreational board and to the Premier League. Now that's not to say we're actually got to merge all of those, but I'm damn sure that the ECB are going to look at us and say, well, if we're going to give you money in your pot to go out to the board, and that's part of that is government money, then we need you to be in decent shape. So that's the first point. I think we are in receipt of government money indirectly in that way. The second situation where we're certainly in receipt of public money is the City Council. Now, it may not have escaped you that actually we've got sat on the books at the moment a loan of £20 million from the City Council. Now, we have a very strong relationship with the City Council, and that's been so ever since they lent us the money. And I don't see that changing. But there may well be circumstances going forward where we actually do want to change the terms of that loan through whatever might be happening. Now, all the messages we're getting is that DCMS and government, the Minister for the Regions particularly, is likely to instruct local authorities that if they are going to be supporting local sporting bodies, then their governance has to match the code of conduct as set by DCMS. So we can't ignore that the Birmingham City Council is part of our makeup. So again, we can't turn a blind eye to them. So what are we proposing? And if you could put the chart up. Now, I'm very conscious that if you're a little bit near the back, you may not be able to pick out the words on that. If you're near the front, you should be. If those at the back haven't been to Specsavers, you might have a problem. But at the back, we've actually got copies. So we'll start from the back and work forward, testing everybody's eyesight, just for you to look at, to save looking at the screen. Now, I'm going to start with the Members' Committee, if I may. A Members' Committee does exist in other counties, but in the cases where it does, they have no representation or influence on the board of the club or the management of the club. I have to admit, one of those is actually a club that's actually now a privately owned business rather than a members' club. But they don't have any representation. We were very careful that we didn't want to go down that route. So the Members' Committee, which will consist of 10 people elected by the membership through the AGM in the same way, subject to the Members' Committee themselves being conscious of the skills that they're going to need on that committee, but other than that, it will be freely available for members to put themselves forward, subject to the support of 10 other members, for a position on that Members' Committee. And that will be for 3-year terms with a maximum renewable of 2 terms, so 9 years in total. And that Members' Committee will have the ability to gather members' opinions, but also they will have 2 seats on the board, so they've got a direct ability through those 2 representatives to influence the debate around the board table. And the Members' Committee will also have one of their members sitting on the Audit Committee, the Nominations Committee, the Remunerations Committee, and the Cricket Audit Committee. So again, on the board committees, the Members' Committee will have representation there, so they will know what the board are doing and planning. And I would ask if they've got any concerns with what we're doing, they don't think is in the members' interest, then they're going to have to start shouting. And that's the way it is going to be established, subject to your agreement, of course. So at the moment, there are 9 sitting on the Members' Committee. Well, there will be post the AGM. Paul Dooner, who sat down here on the second row, was actually the first person to be nominated by the members since 2009, and has come forward with the support of 10 members. And as there are no other nominations, Paul will duly be elected to what at the moment will be the General Committee, but post the change of these rules, to to the Members Committee to sit on there. So they will be 9, and the Members Committee will be looking for a final member to make up the 10. And we need to look at the skills available on that committee. We also need to look at the diversity on that committee from both an age and a gender perspective, maybe even ethnicity as well, but particularly from the age and from the gender basis. So, and there will also be retirements coming up over the next 2 or 3 years, which will give us further opportunities to actually bring in new people. Again, as I said earlier, entirely up to the members to whether they put themselves forward or not to support this committee. The board will, in addition to being the 2 representatives that are from the Members Committee, will have 3 members of the club directly elected to the board through the AGM. Now, at the moment, we have to go through a process where the General Committee members on the board have to get elected by the AGM onto the General Committee, then have to rely upon the General Committee agreeing that they can go onto the board, by which time anybody who's got anything else to do has lost total interest and said, thank you very much, Norman, I've got other things to do. So the reason we are going down this directly elected route from the membership to the board is to avoid that situation. So that's 2 from the Members Committee, 3 from directly elected. We'll then have 3 independently appointed directors as we've got at the moment. And I'm anticipating that Michelle, Naz and Mark will continue in those positions during their present terms. But we have added in that those appointments have to be ratified by the members at the AGM when they come to an end of a particular term. So that's an extra protection we're building in for you as the members to actually, you potentially could actually object to the appointment of a non-executive director going forward. So that makes us 8, my master on right, and the final 2 are the 2 members of the executive, the chief executive, who is an obvious one, and also, in normal circumstances, the finance director. It's fairly helpful to have the bean counter accountable there, sat around the table. As it happens at the moment, Craig, who is our finance director and our chief operating officer, so hence the slash in the note of FD/CEO. So that will make up the 10, and they will have all powers to manage the affairs of the club. Around that, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the Nominations Committee. The Nominations Committee will, as I said, have a member of the Members Committee on it, just make sure everything's fair and open on that. The reason for the Nominations Committee, which will have final say on nominations to come forward for the board, but not for the Members Committee, is because we do need to make sure that actually we're broadening the skill sets and got the appropriate skill sets around the board table. You know, leaving it to the chairman to go off and talk to his mates to come along is not really very good governance, and that's particularly how we've been operating for the last 130 years. And I want to change that, so we've got a much broader sort of scope for actually choosing our directors going forward. The Remuneration Committee, I think, speaks for itself. That's a committee which is responsible for agreeing the remuneration package for the senior management, the overall remuneration in terms of annual increases for the rest of the staff, as well as bonuses for the staff and for the senior management. So again, whereas again before it's been left a little bit to the chairman to sort out, there's a much better, strong committee there which will be able to opine on what is appropriate, what is not appropriate given market circumstances. What does that leave us with? The Audit Committee, I think this is a fairly straightforward one, to actually challenge the executive in terms of the accounts. We are actually looking to add an independent chairman of that. So somebody who's not involved with the board, not involved with the club, to come along and chair that group. Pretty standard practice in this business to actually have that person. So an independent to actually put that challenge in. And the final one is the Cricket Audit Committee. Now, since 2007-2008, we actually appointed the directors of cricket, as they then were, as opposed to the head coach who used to be here for 3 or 4 months of the year and then disappear. When we had a permanent body here as director of cricket, I have to be honest, the Cricket Committee's role has become somewhat superfluous. in terms of actually what they, compared to what they used to do under the old club structure, committee structure, whereby they agreed contracts, they agreed firing, and anything that was done, even to the point of picking the team. That's not where we are at the moment. We have an executive cricket management department to actually do that. I'm not saying that Ash will turn away completely from gaining input and scouting knowledge, technical knowledge and advice on what's happening out there in the recreational game from the likes of Michael Powell, Neil Smith, Moshe and others as part of his cricket management operation. The Cricket Audit Committee, though, will be very clearly defined terms of reference, which will actually set out the challenge in terms of the strategy of the Cricket Management Department, how they are creating their budget, how they're spending the budget, is it effective use of money. In terms of strategy, we'll be looking at things like age group development and how we're getting them through from the age group, through the academy, through to the elite squad. How do we balance that in terms of age group of our own development alongside external recruitment from other counties, if that's the way we want to go? Where are we with overseas players and our strategy there? Where are we with callbacks, yes or no? So it's those sort of strategic areas which the Cricket Audit Committee will be challenging Ash and Neil on as the Chief Executive and the Sports Director respectively. So a much more select committee type examination of what's actually happening in that cricket department, which is totally different from the cricket committee which existed pre-2007-2008 and existed a little bit as it's been a nice night out on occasions, but that's no disrespect to anybody sitting in there, it just lost its purpose in terms of what it should be. So that completes the set as to actually what we're looking to have in place.